Okay, so we're at web framework/project help, but I didn't go through the second set of slides here. So I spent quite a bit of time going through these. For web framework/project help, I'm going to leave that pretty open-ended, as I've done for a few lectures here. So if you have questions, y'all haven't been really using the Discord, so this doesn't really matter, but I forgot my phone today, so I can't watch the Discord anyway. So if you are tempted to post something there, we'll have to go old-fashioned today and just raise hands. But if you want web framework project help, I'm going to leave it open-ended. After break, we're doing nothing next week for this class. You don't have to do anything next week. You don't have to meet with your team. No lecture on Monday. Lecture's canceled. Everything's canceled. When we come back, we have a week of. I got to refresh this. We have a week of. Where are we? We have a week of web app architecture and examples, which is pretty much my way of saying I'm going to do whatever I want those weeks. If people have suggestions, as always, I'll cater towards that. One thing I always do this week during these example lectures is show you how to deploy an entire website. So throughout those lectures, it might take one or two, depending on how quick or slow I go through it, depending on how inquisitive y'all are. Ideally, you'll be inquisitive, and I'll give all kinds of more details as I kind of go through things pretty quick during this. I can slow down and explain things further. But what I like to do is just from web app, we built a web app, which you do in this class, of course. You build your homework web app and your project web app. How do I get it out there to people? How do I get it add a domain name so somebody can just go to their browser, type a domain name, and visit my site? That's why I like to go through here. I'll show you things like Nginx, registering a domain name. I'll register a domain name. I usually let the class pick, so start thinking of crazy domain names that you want me to waste $12 on. And deploying it on a live server, I'll deploy it on my DigitalOcean droplet and just show you the whole process of deploying a web app to live users. So that's what I'll do. For these, it probably won't take all 3 lectures unless the dream happens and you're all very inquisitive and ask a lot of questions during that. And I explain a lot of the finer details of what's going on with that. And we have presentations after that. We have presentations the last week of class, and also that Friday of finals week is our final exam time, which I'm using for project presentations. There are exactly enough slots for everyone to present. Is that true? That's not true. I just realized I made a mistake in my math because we have the full hour, not 50 minutes for this. Anyway, use this link, this doodle poll, to sign up for a presentation time. Go to the doodle poll, fill out your team name. If you don't remember your team name, which apparently the first 2 people who filled it out don't, if you don't remember your team name, just put the name of one team member of your team. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out what's going on. You chose team names way back, and they're not posted anywhere, so I understand if you don't remember your team name that you came up with way early in the semester. When the first and last slot, that's dangerous thinking of Squid Games. You'd pick the first and last one first. Ooh. But sign up for your times. Keep in mind that this is the last day, that Friday of finals week, and I'm not going to be strict on attendance during project presentations. Obviously, I haven't been strict on attendance all semester. I'm not going to change my mind, change my strategy going into presentations. So if you don't want to hang out until Friday of finals week just to come and watch just to give your presentation, make sure you sign up early and get one during that last week of classes. And of course, if you want more time to prepare for your presentation, fill out that Friday one. You know the decisions that are there. If you present like Monday, I'll understand that it's before the project deadline. If all of your features aren't fully functional, I'm going to understand that. I'm going to be like, well, they still got another week, another 5 days, 4.5 days to work on it. I understand that they don't have everything done. So I'll take that into consideration. You don't have to present your fully completed project, especially if you have one of those early dates. I guess even for this Friday, you don't have to present your fully completed project. If you didn't get all the features done on the project, you can still get full credit on the presentation. I'm not going to doubly punish you for not getting the features done. As long as you present it well, what you have well, I'm going to give you credit for that. And speaking of, do I even have a presentation rubric? Yes, but I got to update it a little bit. 8 to 10 minutes. Not all team members have to talk. I'll stick with that. Demo and architecture reflection. Okay. Good, I got everything out there. I wanted all this out there. I forgot if I posted it or not because I posted it like day one of the semester. I didn't remember if I posted it or not. So give a demo of your app. It's pretty straightforward. Show us your app. Show us what your app does. Show us it running, run it on your laptop, and just show off your app. You should make sure you show off all 5 features. If any features are not implemented, just say, we don't have WebSockets or we didn't get to DMs, and I'll count that as presenting it for the presentation purposes. For software architecture, show us, at least at some level, what frameworks and what architecture you used for your project. At this point, I don't know, I always reserve the right to quiz all the team members at this point and say, do you really understand what this is doing to the level that you have in your reports? And I can, hammer every team member who worked on that part. I probably won't exercise that, so, but keep that in mind, I guess, but probably not gonna end up really quizzing you during this time. But you should show at least what frameworks you used. We use this this web framework. We use these libraries. This is how everything came together. This is our general architecture. For this, don't just go through the code. I don't want to see any code during this, ideally. A lot of teams on this section, they'll just open up their repo and start scrolling through code and explain it. I mean, you can, but man, it's a boring presentation. Ideally, prepare a few slides that say, that explain each framework and how they interact with each other. Makes a much better presentation. And you should be geared towards multiple audiences, non-technical for the demo, technical for the software architecture, and finally a reflection phase of your project. So we have 3 clear parts. I'm going to grade you on each of these three parts. The reflection is if you could talk to yourself or your team from the beginning of the semester. If you could go back in time to before you started the project, like right after you formed a team, what would you tell your team? What would you say? What advice would you give? What would you do to help them out? And that advice might be, I use these sections, I distill everything that I hear in the reflection sections and forward that to the next semester, by the way. That's the big reason for this. So next semester I can say, okay, teams have done this in the past. Like half the teams that presented said, don't do this. I'm telling you now, and then they still make the same mistakes usually. A lot of last semester was, the reflection was, don't be too ambitious. Don't try to build this huge app. Just kind of build an app that's manageable, because when you get to the end of the semester, everything swamps over you and crushes you. So in reaction, I posted the minimal app. I said, if you just build this, you'll get full credit. That was from the reflections from last semester. I'm saying, hey, don't make that mistake. As much as I want to see some really cool projects, I love seeing that, it's just a bit much. When you have all the homeworks in this class as well, and the project is kind of just one portion of the project of the class, I said, you know what? Let's get rid of all that, take all that reflection advice, and just say, just build this app. So depending on what you all say for this semester, I might have a different change for next semester, or more advice to give students next semester. So that's the presentation. I'll tell you up front that I'm not going to be too strict on the grading of these. As long as you fulfill what's written here and just cover what you're supposed to cover, I'm going to give you full credit on the presentation. So just a heads up on that. If you get up and present and clearly haven't read this document, if no one on your team read this document, the points are going to start coming off, obviously, because, come on. I presume that anyone in this room, all of your teams are going to do well and get perfect scores on the projects, but the people who aren't here and who won't watch this video and might not even know this document exists, it always surprises me how little some students pay attention. They're the ones that need to hear this, and unfortunately they won't. But, that is what it is. And you do all have to be present for the presentation. If you don't show up to the presentation, your team's presentation time, it's obviously a 0 on the presentation. All right, any questions about that? We're at the phase of the semester where I'm looking at what else is going on and kind of just wrapping things up. That's the presentation, the project, you know what you have to do. The TAs are providing feedback for the reports right now. I told them I'm going to give them a few extra days. They have midterms and stuff. So by next Tuesday, you should get your report feedback. Though from what they've done so far, they said a lot of teams just don't have reports. So that is kind of is what it is. But the big thing, sign up for a presentation time. Those of you who show up to lecture, you get that information. I purposely didn't post it on Discord or anything. The information that you should sign up so you can get the best, whatever time slot you want. Yeah.
So what about in the install? Are you just expecting us to basically do a PowerPoint and read off that, or is it more of like a live demo where we
You have to have the live demo, but the rest of it can be a PowerPoint. No, it's got to be your actual running software. Did I make that clear? Actually, if I didn't make that clear, I won't say that. But let me revisit my wording on that. I think I do say it has to be running software, though. That's my intent. If I didn't communicate it that way, then I won't stick to it. ML functionality. Yeah, run your app. And no, it's got to be your actual app running. That's my intent, and I do have the right wording there. Is there a concern with that?
No, I was just wondering.
Okay.
Something doesn't go wrong.
Yeah, that is actually the idea. I want to make sure your software actually works. If your software doesn't actually work, if it works, the demo should be fine. In theory, obviously, live demos, there's a lot that can go wrong. But again, that's the point. I want to see your actual software running. You should have confidence in your app and be able to present it like that. But yeah, it's got to be running. I'm glad I got that wording. You scared me for a little bit. I'm glad I got that wording in there because that is absolutely my intent, to have running software. Like a 442 demo. Would you let your 442 teams? What's that? Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. And during COVID, these were videos as well, because there just wasn't anything we can do. But they're supposed to be presentations. Like for 442 demos, like the team has to actually demo their software. You wouldn't let them come in with a video. You'd be taking points off like crazy. I hope, at least. But yeah, during COVID, we had to cut a lot of corners because presentation skills are important in presenting a tech demo. It's important skills. And unfortunately, during COVID, we just couldn't force you to have those, get practice with those skills. What was that? Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah.
So for the demonstration, you said that if we did have a feature fully working, we just mention that we didn't have it fully working, that would count as
Yeah, as long as you mention it, I'll be okay for demo purposes.
So theoretically, if we didn't implement any of the features, we could go up, say we didn't implement any of them, and then for the software architecture part, say we didn't use any libraries, we didn't write any code, they could pull points on that too. And then for the reflection, reflect right
I would want a longer reflection. I was just going to say, you have to hit the 8 minutes at least. So 8 minutes of reflection, in theory, yeah, I'll stick to what I said. I'll allow it. Where do I put the breakdown of the project? Yeah, so you get the 25. You'd only get 25% on the project unless you were presenting Monday and did everything by Friday, of course. You could technically get full credit on the whole project for that. And I would assume that you would have 8 minutes to talk about on the reflection if that's how bad your project went. Unless your reflection is just well, we would have actually done it. But yeah, I guess technically I'd allow it. It's technically correct, the best kind of correct. Yeah, any more questions about anything for the rest of the semester? And by the way, we're done with homework content. Like, you know everything you need to do for the homeworks. We've been done since last Friday, I suppose, a week ago. And you've had everything you need for the project for a while. I don't really cover the projects. Like, there's nothing, like I teach you the concepts in lecture, and then it's your job to take those concepts and find the frameworks and libraries and stuff that apply those concepts. That's all on you. You have everything you need for the project. Obviously, today's like days like this, you can always ask me questions and get some extra help on the project. But by default, I don't cover any of that. I cover that in one line in the syllabus where I say, that's not the syllabus. You should be able to find, read, and understand technical documentation. That's the project right there. That's like 1/4 of your expectations is, I guess, the second bullet point too. Develop software with little guidance. That's the project right there. Find that documentation, find those libraries, implement them, use them, go through the tutorials, read documentation, etc. That's what you're getting practice with on the project. Yeah. So that's a question between me and the TAs. I believe I'm just going to post it to Autolab. So I have all your GitHub repos, and the TAs are going to go to your GitHub repo, find your reports, and then we're collecting all the feedback in a Google Sheet right now. And then I'm going to take those results. Once they're all done on Tuesday, I'm going to stare at it and go, yeah, I think I'll just post this to Autolab. Alternatively, I might email you your feedback, but I think I'd rather have it on Autolab. Email is, I don't know. Email will get lost. Like a week or two from now, it'll be hard to find your feedback. If it's on Autolab, it's just always there. Plus, that's how I communicated everything to you so far in this class, so grade-wise, so why not? But yeah, you can expect that to pop up on Autolab on Tuesday, unless by some miracle I come up with a better idea to communicate that to you. It's probably going to be on Autolab, though. And most of it, for most teams, will just say, you don't have reports. But you know what? Just is what it is. I'm not gonna. I used to have more, even last semester, I had more project checkpoints and more stricter requirements. They weren't that strict, but stricter requirements for each checkpoint. I'm like, man, I'm getting sick of just babysitting and hand-holding. I'm just gonna let them do what they do, and if they don't get feedback and they get bad scores on their project, I don't know. But the project also weighed more last semester. I decreased it to 20% and then said, whatever, I'll give them enough rope, if they do what they do, it's whatever. They can still pass the class. So that's kind of my mental compromise. All right, let's get some content in here. So this content is what was, maybe will be again, homework content, adding HTTPS to the homework, to your homework server. Obviously, I don't require it this semester, but if I did, this is roughly what I would make you do. I'll solve the homework objective, what would be the homework objective for you today, so you can kind of see what it would have been and kind of why I don't see much educational value in it. Someday, maybe I'll find a way to make it better, but adding SSL or TLS these days to your server. So the library for this, we use a library, but not in the code, this Openssl library, which is written in C. There's wrappers in most languages, but you'll see what we'll do in a second. I'll use this library via the command line, not in the code itself. So you would download, install this library if it's not pre-installed on your operating system, and use that to generate a self-signed certificate. So one that doesn't go back to a root CA. So an insecure certificate, one that you should run away from if you see it on a different site. But if you're developing a site, sometimes it's useful to use self-signed certs during the development process. And we use this for all of the things. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. The Openssl, so SSL got renamed to TLS, but not all the libraries have been renamed. Openssl is still Openssl. They didn't rename it OpenTLS. So it does cause a little bit of confusion, but Openssl now implements TLS. It probably still supports all the SSL implementations, but Openssl we're going to use for TLS these days. And Openssl, if you recall, it seems like so long ago now, the Heartbleed vulnerability, the Heartbleed leak, that was Openssl. It was this library, so make sure you use an up-to-date version of this library, or else things can get bad. And this line right here, this mess of a line, type this in your terminal if you have Openssl installed, and it'll generate a self-signed cert for you. So you install it. If you're running Windows, you have to install it. If you're not running Windows, you already got Openssl installed or some implementation of the same API, and you can use that. So let's go through this command. And I still have the language of you can use this for your homework, because this was a homework objective before. But again, I don't know. You'll see what it is. You'll see exactly what we do. So let's look at the command. So Openssl is the program that we're going to run. And let's go through these commands one at a time. Request a signed certificate with the X509 standard. This is the standard for certificates that we use on the internet. So give me a certificate that's in the X509 standard. That's the first two commands kind of go together. New key, RSA 4K. Give me a 4K key using the RSA algorithm. Oops. Key out private.key. This says save my private key in a file named private.key. Out cert.pem. Save my certificate, my public certificate, which contains my public key, in a file named cert.pem. This cert should expire in 1 year. Sign this. Did I skip SHA-256? Keep a SHA-256 hash as a signature, not a cryptographic signature, but keep that SHA-256 hash on the certificate, and don't require a password to use the private key. Just let anybody who has access to that private key use it without typing in a password. If somebody had to be sitting there on your web app typing in this password all day, it wouldn't be fun. So that's the breakdown. And then for the homework, when it came to installing this cert on your server, I said, okay, you have this cert, you have this private key. They're saved in 2 separate files. They're in the proper format. Everything's good because you cut and paste that line from my slides. And you have these 2 files. Now it's up to you to go into your library, read the documentation, and figure out what the hell to do with those 2 files. So you have to install those files. Each language is a bit different. Even in Python, if you're using sockets versus socket server, I always recommend using socket server now early because it solves a lot of problems. Depending on which one you're using, this is a different process, but find a way to install that cert into your server. And that was the bulk of the difficulty of the objective. What to actually do wasn't much, but figuring out where to put a few lines of code, that was the difficulty. So it was kind of an exercise in reading documentation. The big problem here is depending on which language you were using and how you're using that language's TCP library, this is either really difficult or really easy. For example, I had one, when I had this, there was one poor soul using Java, which was a complete pain in the ass to install this cert. But in Python and Node, it was just like 1 line of code and you're done. So it was really, I don't know, there were a lot of problems with it, which is why I'm not having you do it. But I'll show you how to do it in Python right now. All right, so first, let me copy this. So I'm at my web server. This is the one that we saw earlier in lecture, except I added one route just to have something to look at. I realized I didn't have a home page on it, so I just kind of slapped a route. It doesn't even belong here, but whatever. So if we see what a great website, that means things are working. So let me undo some of this first. So this is what it would look like. I'll keep some of that so I don't have to Google the syntax. This is based on this Ssl library in Python itself. So if you want to see where this came from, here's the documentation. I Googled Python SSL socket. It's a little hard to find this because socket server, it's not part of that, but it's part of the socket class. And then it shows me how to add those files to my server, to my socket. So the documentation is for sockets. We don't have sockets, we have a socket server. So there are a few steps that we have to do, and I'll show you that. So let's go to our code. Go to the terminal. Let me stop the app first. We run the app first. I'm running this on port 8000. So what a great website. It works. We can inspect. Network. Go to Opera. What a great website. Network. And we can see all our, everything's working. So let's stop this server. Let's go into our terminal, and I'm going to paste that. Oh, God damn it. Well, just pretend I pasted it. I'm going to paste that command and run that, and it's going to give me all kinds of output. And it's going to ask me a whole bunch of questions, like country name is the first thing that it asks. Luckily, we can leave a lot of these blank. State, blank, locality, organization, organizational unit, common name, and email address. To get a cert, we do need an email address, but since it's a self-signed cert anyway, it can be whatever the hell we want it to be. We're going to say email@example.com. And the command's over. Cool. So we can look over in our files. There they are. And we can see that we have two new files, a certificate, which is going to contain all the information for my certificate in, it's bytes here, in X509 format, which is a format we haven't talked about in this class, and I won't talk about because we don't need to, and I don't memorize the format or anything. And the private key, in a similar format, 4K bits. You gotta be careful, bits, not bytes. 4K bits of private key here. So this is how big a private key is if you want it visualized. Like that's what an attacker would have to brute force. That's a lot of information there. 4K bits of information. They're not cracking that. If we have perfect security properties, that would be 4K bits of entropy, which is what we call stupid big. That's a lot. We don't have perfect security. We don't get actual 4K bits of entropy, but we get plenty of entropy. We're way beyond the 80 bits that we need to be comfortably calling something secure. Nobody's cracking this private key unless they actually break the encryption scheme, RSA itself. So we have this cert and this private key. And from the documentation, to be able to get that cert and private key installed, we're going to use the Ssl library. This is built into Python. I just had to import it at the top. I didn't have to install anything. It's built into Python. I'm going to get an SSL context and use the TLS protocol. That's going to give me a context and that context is going to need my certificate and private key. So I'm going to give my cert.pem, the file name, and private.key, the file name for my private key. That's going to load up a context that has my cert and private key loaded into it. And then my next task is to add that to my TCP socket server. So I have a threaded socket server. I have my server. I'm running it forever. What I want to do is take this idea from this documentation, which takes a socket, and I want to add this context to that socket with context.wrap socket. So I want to put a wrapper class around this socket that's going to be the TLS encryption that's going to happen, outside of the TCP itself. So I want to wrap that in my TLS. There's too many acronyms. I want to wrap this socket in my TLS context to be able to get the encryption and decryption based on that private key and certificate. So that's what I want to do. This is my goal. Problem is, I don't have a socket. I have a socket server. So how do we get what we want out of this? Well, luckily, it's actually super easy, but takes forever to find it. I mean, at least maybe I'm just projecting a little. It took me a while to find what to do. It's super easy once you know what to do, but finding out what to do takes too long. Again, why I don't think it makes a great homework objective, because you're just banging your head against the internet trying to figure out what the hell to actually do. And once you find out what to do, it's like 3 sentences. So then a few students figured out what to do, bang their head against it. And then when somebody asks them, like, dude, I have no idea what to do, they're like, oh, just type these 2 lines and you're done. So a lot of students didn't even get anything out of it because, and I can't even catch them on that. On the other side, like, yeah, you're all going to have those 2 lines. I don't know if you actually figured it out anyway. But anyway, I want the socket. I have a server, server.socket. You have access to the underlying socket. If you look at the socket server class, I shouldn't really dive into this, but hopefully I can find this quick. If you dive into the socket server class, hopefully we find it fast. You'll see that it does actually import socket. So if you Google around Python TCP socket, you'll actually find this socket library. And by default, that's what a lot of students end up using, just historically speaking, because that's one of the first tutorials that pops up in Google. So a lot of students will use that socket library instead of socket server. Then I make sure to remind everyone, like, hey, if you're using Python, use socket server for the love of everything. It's going to save you when we get to web sockets. Because using sockets, you have to manually do your own multi-threading, your own concurrency at least. With socket server, we just do threading, slap threading in front of it, and everything's done. So if you have everything set up with sockets, it's tough. But the socket server does use the socket library underneath the hood. So when we're looking at this documentation, which uses the socket library, but we're using socket server, we just say, well, server, give me your socket. Why not? Now we can take this code from the documentation we have that socket. So I'm going to take my context and wrap that socket with this TLS context, which has my cert and private key. It knows what to use for the cert and private key. It's server side. And I'm going to call that secure socket with the same kind of syntax as opening a file in Python. Open a file as whatever. I'm opening a new socket that's a wrapper for my socket as something named secure socket. Now I'm going to go back to my server. Oops. If I can type the right letters here. I'm going to go back to my server, and I'm going to say, hey, that socket that I got from you, that variable that stored that socket, it's now the secure socket. So the socket that you were using, use this secure socket instead, and serve forever. And that's it. So there's a few lines of code, a few extra because we're using socket server. So we have to get out of socket server into socket, do what we need to do, and then go back into socket server by using socket server.socket and server.socket equals. So a little bit extra, but not too much. And we go back to our site, and it's broken. Ah, crap. Well, maybe it works in Firefox. Nope, it's broken. Why is it broken? Anybody want to tell me why it's broken? Because we switched our protocol. We got to slap that S in there. We're using the HTTPS protocol now, HTTP over TLS. We're not using HTTP anymore. HTTPS, oops, I hit a shift in there. I just want one window open. HTTPS:// my goodness, I can't type today. Now it's going to give me a warning. It's going to say, hey, this is a huge risk. You have a self-signed cert. You know, it'll work, but geez, what are you doing? What is this site? I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to say accept the risk and continue. I'm going to say this self-signed cert is fine. And there's my beautiful website hosted with HTTPS. We should be able to confirm down here as well. I have an HTTPS connection. I am encrypting traffic as I communicate with this server. We had a key exchange. We got the cert and everything. We can go up here. When we saw it before, the cert was just, a mess of information, a mess of bytes. But we can go in here and actually see the information that we have for the cert. I know this is hard to see. Can't make it bigger. We can see the email address that I put on there, the expiration date 1 year from today. We have to go back over to Opera for this. I don't know how to get the information there. We go to Opera. Opera actually won't let us continue. This is a fairly recent update in Opera that if you have a self-signed cert, which I think must have been really recent because even a few months ago I was using self-signed certs to test something in Opera. In Chrome and Firefox, I believe, I didn't test with Chrome, but I know Firefox, you can still use self-signed certs. But it just won't let me. But it will let me view the certificate, which is why I want to be back over here. We can see all the information. When you see all this information, self-signed, I signed it, but we use SHA-256 with RSA, expiration date, the SHA-256 signature. Where's my private key or my public key? Oh, there it is. The public key, 512 bytes or 4K bits of public key. So it gets all the information from my cert, but then it says, hey, this is self-signed. I ain't playing this game. You can't even see your stuff, which frustrating as it may be. That's the feature that they implemented in Opera. But in Firefox, we have HTTPS. If we go HTTP, nothing's hosted there. HTTPS, that's where my site's hosted now. So we generated a cert and a private key where the cert contained the public key. Added it to our server. Now we're HTTP over TLS. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
If you wanted to get a real cert for your website, is that something you have to pay for?
No, there are free services. CertBot is the common one. And you get a free cert. That's part of what I'll do the week after we come back from break. I'll go to CertBot and I'll get a cert. It's completely free. What you do need is a domain name that you control. So you got to pay for the domain name, and then with that domain name, you can get a cert. But they won't sign a cert. Like a cert has to be signed for a domain name. So I'm not going to be able to get a signed cert from an official CA for localhost. I just can't do it. And that's part of what's really holding back the homework. If you could get a signed cert, an actual legit cert for free that you could use in your dev environment, I would absolutely put on the homework because it'd just be so cool. But when you have to do self-signed certs and have the warnings and Opera won't even open your page, it's just not as cool. It's not as fun.
So when you get issued that cert from them, we're talking about, do they just send you the cert and private key files? And then you
They actually have a script that automates the whole process. They make it super simple. Like when we get to that point in 2 weeks, like I'll just type one command in the command line and everything just magically is done. And I'm HTTPS at that point. Yeah, certbot, super simple. So you say what you're running. I like to run Nginx on Ubuntu. They'll say install the script. And then run this command, certbot -- nginx. It'll ask questions throughout the script, but that's it. It automates everything. It's one of the best tools out there to make HTTPS, to make encryption accessible to everybody. Super helpful to have that. If you want a non-certbot cert, like if you have an enterprise solution, like certbot has certain limitations. I'm not familiar what they actually are, but once you get big enough, they're going to be like, hey, cut it out. And once you get to that point, you have to go out and pay for your certs, and they do get expensive. Like UB's certs cost a lot for all their domains and subdomains. They spend a lot of money on certs.
There's really no reason to not have a cert.
There's every reason to have a cert, yeah. If you don't have a cert, and you use Google, Chrome, or any browser, I'd assume every browser is doing this now. If it's HTTP, there's just all kinds of flashing lights and things that'll scare your users away. Google kind of made that decision for everybody that everything should be encrypted. So if you're not encrypted these days, Google's gonna basically come after you and say, everybody stay away from the unclean. You got to be encrypted, for better or worse. Even if you just have a static site that's just like hosting HTML, where nothing needs to be secure, you still kind of have to be. Like the course website, 312.com, there's nothing there that's protected. There's nothing there that needs to be encrypted. But I still got my cert because I don't want you going to the course website, especially for a web apps course, and have Google be like, are you sure about this? Which, I wonder if we could test that to see what, most sites won't let you use HTTP anyway. Most sites, like that, it loaded, but it redirected me to HTTPS. Most sites will redirect you, including 312.com, for what it's worth. You can't really use HTTP on most sites these days. So if I say, no, I don't want my stuff encrypted. Oh, actually, I do have a demo for you. I don't want my stuff encrypted. I get a 301 with a location of HTTPS 312. That's what most sites are going to do. That's what they should do. There is a site that doesn't do that. I do get to demo this. I was like, I wonder what sites even do. Buffalo.edu will, and you'll get this. I guess it's not too bad. You'll get this caution sign. If they click it, they'll see the scary red text. But if you don't click it, at least on Opera, it's not the worst. You just get that thing instead of the lock. But if anybody notices that, I don't know. It stands out to me. It probably stands out to most of you as well, if not all. But to a typical user, you might not notice that. I think on Chrome it is a bit more. But UB does not redirect to HTTPS. Yes, it's frustrating. I'm not thrilled about it that my own university is like, oh, whatever. What the hell are they doing over there? But anyway, they don't redirect. So it wasn't too bad, just a little caution sign in the corner, but why not? When it's so easy, why not? and they have a cert. This is just like one line in their configuration. Just redirect HTTP to HTTPS. They have a cert, but whatever. It is what it is. All right, any other questions? All right, have a great break. I'll see you in 2 weeks, a week and a half.